Hello everybody. As many of you will already know, being a car guy isn't always the easiest thing, because we are stuck in this eternal battle between what our head says and our heart. And there is perhaps no better car that demonstrates exactly this dichotomy than what I'm driving today. A 2010 Bentley Continental GTC Supersports. The battle I refer to is the one between numbers and experience. You see, it's very easy to reduce a car simply to a set of statistics. But if you've been lucky enough to perch yourself behind the wheel of a Porsche, a Ferrari, a McLaren, an Aston Martin, or even something as humble as an MX-5, you'll know that very often numbers do not tell you the full picture. And the strangest thing about the Bentley is that if it wanted to be, it really could be a numbers car. Considering it's over a decade old now, the headline power figure of 630 horses, the all-wheel drive, the 12-cylinder W layout engine, the pair of turbos, and the 2.5-ton curb weight are all rather impressive. However, as a concept, you'd struggle to find anything more at odds with itself. The Continental GT, I'm sure you're already familiar with, and although I've never been fond of the looks, having now driven one, I have to say it's one of the few cars in the modern era that truly deserves the title of a Grand Tourer. A car which will very happily get you down to the Côte d'Azur, but a true Grand Tourer needs to not only deliver you to your destination, but be able to put a smile on your face when you find a good road. These days, most things calling themselves a GT car will in fact be a sports car, or if I was being kind, a Super GT, stuff like the Ferrari F12. That is not a particularly relaxing drive. Wonderful, stunning achievement, but doesn't exactly put you at ease in the same way the early Conti GT did. In fact, as a pure Grand Tourer, I much preferred it over the later Conti GT. Now, the first generation Continental GT had quite a long life. It was introduced in about 2003, I think, and then went on to around 2011, where it received a pretty major facelift and turned into the Mark II car. When it landed, the original was hardly lacking for numbers. 550 odd horsepower out of its twin turbocharged W12 was certainly ample. However, because the car weighed so much, that gave you a 0 to 60 time of only about 5.1 seconds, which means on the one hand, really impressive, nice big power figure, but on the other, not exactly blistering acceleration. Your modern Golf R owner would hardly be blown away by the pace of the original car. Such is progress. Over the years, it was refined, lightened a little, lowered, stiffened, given a little bit more power, and then the most extreme variant came towards the end, as they often do, when Bentley introduced the Supersports. They shaved over 100 kilos from the car, even removing the back seats. They gave it the seats from a Bugatti Veyron and even more power at 630 horses. It was still a bit of a lump, now weighing 2.3 tons despite the weight reduction. However, it was a lot brisker. Now it got to 62 in 3.7 seconds, and as Bentleys go, it was a much more competent thing round the bends. So what is the natural thing to do with your lightweight, stripped out, more focused road car? You lop the roof off. You add back in all that weight you've just shaved out, the rigidity takes a massive hit, and you wind up with perhaps the most confused car on the planet. It has quite a bit of scuttle shake, and yet I don't care, because this thing is magnificent. Absolutely sensational. It has been brought to me by a lovely chap called Navaz, who's had a couple of cars on the channel already. I do like being at the stage of my career where I now have repeat customers. So the first car of his that I drove was his Maserati. That in fact inspired me to buy my own. After that, he brought me his Lexus LS 600H, and now he has brought me this. It's going to be going up for sale in a few months, and he's going to be asking around £70,000 for it. I've got to say, that seems like a bit of a bargain. This car truly looks and feels like it's brand spanking new. That may have something to do with the fact that it's only got 17,500 miles on it, but a car of this age still needs a degree of care to make sure the condition is preserved. I've seen plenty of cars with similar mileage that are knackered. I will shortly be testing the Bentley's performance credentials. However, this car would mean absolutely nothing if it couldn't still do the wafty thing. And this is the danger you run when you build a car like this, because let's be honest here, this was never ever going to give a GT3 or a Speciale Aperta even a moment of lost sleep. However, there is a big risk that what it'd do is lose all of the Bentleyness. We've already discussed the scuttle shake, and that is rather unfortunate. However, the ride, despite a stiffened and lowered suspension, is actually still pretty pleasant. And these seats I rather love. In fact, all of this is absolutely amazing. Yes, there are lots of familiar VW bits in here because, as I think we all know by now, underneath you will find a Phaeton. That's not exactly a bad thing, because the Phaeton was designed as a near cost-no-object exercise in showing VW could build the best car in the world. The leather is exquisite, these seats are absolutely spectacular, really support you, but are still quite comfortable and would be excellent on a long journey. I'm not sure if they have height adjustment. I do feel like I'm perched up a little bit too much, but I haven't managed to find it yet. The combination of the red leather and the carbon fibre works so well in here, but even that is all part of the joke that is this car, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but putting carbon fibre in something that still weighs 2.5 tons is a laugh, isn't it? But it looks magnificent, and this is what I'm talking about. I know it's not really doing a single thing to improve the performance. It just looks good, and I don't care. And if you're into this sort of thing, I think that's how it should be. The gearbox in this is still a ZF 6-speed, but a different version to the regular car. It has been reworked, and shift times, I'm told, are cut dramatically. The steering feel, even at modest speeds, is actually quite decent too, and there is a sense of occasion about this car. The only real thing I can think of that would be a direct comparison is perhaps the Maserati Gran Cabrio. It has many of the same qualities and is a true four-seater convertible. That has, I think, a little bit more space in the back. Legroom seems limited here compared with the coupe, but if you call it a three-seater, I think you won't be disappointed. The scuttle shake in that car was also pretty bad. However, the Bentley scores highly because it has a usable boot, something the Maserati did not. And now we're at my favourite bit of test road, so I'm going to put the car into manual mode. We do have a car up there, so I'm going to give it a minute before I put my foot down. I'm also going to put the suspension into its sporty mode. So you've actually got several different settings for the suspension, and I'm going to put it in its halfway house. So let's change down, see what she's got. This is superb. I think the best way to describe the acceleration is that moment when you're about to go on holiday, you're in the plane, you're on the runway, and the pilot finally gives it the beans. That sense of enormous thrust pulling a very heavy object feels very, very different. I know the numbers would tell us that on paper, a small, lightweight car with a lower powered engine is going to feel very similar to a larger car with more power. As long as the power to weight is the same, they should be relatively equal. But the truth is, that's just not the case. Yes, I am aware, by the way, that the science is a reason behind that too, and that things aren't quite as obvious as simply power to weight. Aerodynamics, torque, all sorts of stuff comes into play. But the feeling you get of being behind the wheel of something like this, with the thrust that it has, is a very good word to describe a Bentley, is joyous. Sports car, it is absolutely not, but enjoyable definitely is. I'm going to dispatch this Nissan X-Trail when I can. I'll either turn around or get past them and enjoy a little bit more of what this car has to offer. A permanent Torsen all-wheel drive system with a 40-60 rear split for the torque means that you've got a lot of grip. I can put my boot all the way in second here, and I don't get even the remotest hint that the traction control is having to intervene. this is a very grippy car than it should be, because it's got a lot pressing those tyres into the road. Helping bring this all to a stop is some absolutely enormous, I think the largest at the time, carbon ceramic brakes. And they work really nicely. In fact, the pedal feel is pretty good. The upgrades made to the gearbox also really do work, because this thing shifts pretty much like my Maserati, and that was about as good as a ZF 6-speed ever got. I'm sure if I looked into it, I'd find they are probably the same box, or very, very closely related anyway. But what this means is the gearbox is not a problem. In fact, I think I might prefer it over the dual clutch in the newer car. Well, like I said, we keep coming back to this theme of what your head says is a technically superior solution, but then what you actually experience and what feels right can often be a very different thing. And with many cars, I've found that actually the perfect partner is a 6-speed ZF, because if you've got it here where it's configured correctly, it's a very nice, decent, smooth auto box, far better around town than any single clutch manual, even the very best of them, and probably just as good, if not better, than some of the early dual clutches as well. However, on the move, where it may not have, say, the speed of a dual clutch, it has more smoothness than a single clutcher, and it works quite well. It's also a lot more durable than a single clutch, and some dual clutches too. It's hardly a small car, this, but placing it on the road is not difficult. That high driving position actually does help you a little bit there. Oh, and while I remember, I should also point out that the number plate does not mean what you think it means. It's trying to spell the owner's name, and he's had the plate for a little while. It's just unfortunate now. I'm not sure whether it would be fair to say that the noise is a disappointment. From here, even with the roof down, you can certainly hear the car and it burbles nicely. However, it's not a car where I let it go to the red line simply to hear it. That is another area where something like an Aston Martin or a Maserati would score over the Bentley. The truth be told, though, neither of those cars can come even close to replicating the feeling of majesty you get in here. I must say that compared with something like the Maserati, everything in here feels far better built and infinitely more durable. Though they may be shared with VW parts, the switches actually look very nice. So Bentley have tried there to do their best, and really has paid off, because even after a decade, these are very, very nice things to use. Maybe silly to talk about something like a window switch, but when it comes to a car like Bentley, I think it's not silly at all. And some more good news, because before doing this review, I thought I'd check out a couple of buyer's guides to see if there were any common failure points on these cars. The fact is, they seem to be generally quite durable. Now, don't be fooled, these are not going to be cheap to run. Anyone who tells you otherwise is probably lying. Yes, they'll be very thirsty, and it's the variety of, if you have to ask, you can't afford it when it comes to that. It's a big car. This means they'll go through things like bushings and all that sort of stuff very frequently. If you do care about your handling, expect to have to do the geometry a little bit more than you might another car. That's simply common to anything this big with this amount of power and performance. Generally speaking, though, the advice seems to be to try and find a car which has had relatively consistent use, has had therefore consistent maintenance, as opposed to one which has sat around for extended periods. That's the key thing that kills these. Parts prices aren't even that bad because of many shared items with VW, but labour is costly. So spark plugs are only something like 120 quid, despite the fact there's 12 of them. Coil packs about triple that, but it's getting to them that's the difficult bit. And here's the thing, when you've got an engine like this, even if the gearbox wasn't up to snuff, it wouldn't really matter, because if you had the wrong gear, the car doesn't seem to notice. It is only a couple of degrees today, and even without the wind deflector installed, it's not actually too breezy in here. I haven't even mucked around with the temperature or anything, and I'm perfectly comfortable. I say to people all the time that this is really not the kind of car for me, and I'm never ever going to buy one, and that'd probably be true of the original early first generation coupe. I look at something like this and you can't help but wonder, you know. The biggest item apparently that can go is the head gaskets, and that is not cheap. That can be about £15,000, but it's not a very common thing to have to do, and there are ways of checking if it needs doing. Beyond that, if you're looking to buy one, get it inspected, or just perform your usual checks. Make sure it's not blowing blue smoke, etc, etc, etc. Please remember, I am an idiot on the internet and not an automotive encyclopedia, so don't take my opinion really on anything, use it as a guide to form your own. Even the stereo's alright. Not great, but it's got plenty of bass, which is not easy in a car with no roof. So then, the Bentley Continental GTC Supersports, a car that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. A nice, big, soft Grand Tourer that somebody then decided they wanted to make not soft at all, stiff, low, fast, that somebody then decided they wanted to put all the weight back in, remove the rigidity from, and then sling out to the showrooms, where someone bought this for close to £200,000. It's mad. It makes no sense, and I love it. Navaz is going to regret letting this one go. I know that, and having spoken to him this morning, I think he knows that too. But like me, he's also determined to experience as many things as this life has to offer, and he doesn't have the resources to have them all at once. So therefore, it has to go. But I'm very glad I got to try it first. If you're thinking about buying this, drop me a line and I'll happily put you in touch with the man. You'll not regret it. Please like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.